site inspection photos. And we're going to see everything we can see in each one of these photos. And I'll usually start out and give some hints. And your participation is really good. I will post your participation if you say it. So any questions and any participation, you do it through chat. So, and just go ahead and chat me. So we're going to go ahead and get started unless somebody has a question or something. Like I said, this is kind of fun. It says 45 minutes. The last time I ran about an hour and a half. You can stay as long as you want. I got some great photos provided to me by our marketing staff today from jobs in the past, and so this is really fun. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and let's have some fun today, everybody. So here we go. This is the first photo, right? What do we see here? Well, I'm going to start out and I'm going to say, hey, we have above ground storage tanks, right? What are we looking for? Secondary containment. These above ground storage tanks have secondary containment. It's a tank within a tank. So it's a concrete vault, and then the tank is inside it. But I'd be more concerned about kind of what's right in this area here. See where my mouse is moving? I'd be more concerned with what that is. I don't know what this is sitting on top of. Looks like possible a light pole, but it's also a place where any leakage, groundwater flow, or whatever can run right into there. And so that kind of concerns me. It does look like the concrete's been cut. And it looks like, what do we have here, right here? What could that be? It could be a vapor well. It could be a monitoring well. I mean, in reality, you'd want your assessor to go over there and take a picture of that, right? Well, you're talking about the striping on the ground being faded. That's true. This looks newer than that over there. I think if you look at these pumps, these fuel pumps, you're going to see that these fuel pumps are really old, whereas these convault, double-contained, above-ground tanks are probably fairly new. These pumps are really dated, and so obviously this thing's been here a long time. I'd probably want to pull out the file on this site at the local agency and see if they removed tanks, sampled properly, that kind of thing. And you're right, we've got seams between the concrete and the asphalt that you cannot seal. And so right away, I'd be concerned with, any spillage, whatever, being washed in, going into these cracks right here and being a concern. Okay, I think we pretty much covered everything on this. These are vent pipes, by the way. So if we saw some vent pipes back on that back block wall, we'd be a little concerned. But I don't see anything else. We can zoom out on this a little bit and see if we see anything else. No, that's about it. Okay, I think we covered this photo. Let's go to the next one. What do we got here? Close. It's a three-stage clarifier. So you've got your stages 1, 2, 3, and this is probably the sewer point where it goes into the sewer. They probably have an NPDES permit for this site. There's definitely some concerns here. First of all, a clarifier really is designed to capture solids, capture lighter material than water, floats to the top. So that'd be your oils, greases, solvents, that kind of stuff. Not so much solvents. They probably get mixed in by now. But the real key is this is a three-stage clarifier. So the first thing you'd ask yourself is, do they have records for it being pumped out? Because if it isn't pumped out regularly, the different vaults fill up with stuff, overflow, and really then just go into the drain, and that's not what they're supposed to do. So it's obviously a concern. But you'd want to see pumping records. But then we've got right here, this concerns me a little bit. Right here, we don't have, we have where it's been cut out, and that's probably the sewer line going in. And so either they've had a leak or something in the past, or usually where clarifiers leak is they overflow because they get filled up, or where the pipes go into them and go out of them into the chambers, the seal around it leak, and they've got to come from somewhere. So maybe there's a wash area inside here, or there's some drains in the floor drains in the shop that all lead to here, to the three-stage clarifier. So right away you're looking at this and you're saying, hey, I got to find where all this, where whatever goes in here comes from. And so your site assessor should right away say, hey, I got to find the floor drain, or the floor sump, or the wash area, or the mechanic's shed or shop, and find where all that where it all comes from. Pretty cool. One of the things I do while I was out in the field is I'd pop these and see how clean they are, and pop this and make sure there's no leakage around. It's usually an angle, 90-degree angle, into the sewer. You know, yes, you note this in a phase one. All phase ones have a place. You know, it has an area, whether there's any clarifiers, sumps, floor drains, that kind of thing. You're going to address this. So if they have good pump records, there's no staining around it, which in this case there isn't. You look at where the drain that feeds this thing, or drains that feed this thing, are, and see that there's no staining running into the drain. All kinds of things are going to make up whether this is a recognized environmental condition and possibly needs sampling. Now, most of the time, I would think you'd need to recommend sampling on any clarifier if they have hazardous materials going into it. And they usually wouldn't have a clarifier if they didn't have petroleum products or hazardous materials going into it. Because like I said, about 50% of the time we found leaks. And really all you would need to do is put a little boring right here about 7 feet and a boring right here about 7 feet, because they're usually only 4 feet deep, maybe 5 feet deep. And then, you know, a cone of depression, a cone, it's an upside down cone of dispersion that if this thing leaked, and you're going to catch it. And you just sample the ground. If the groundwater's shallow, you sample groundwater. And you'll know right away whether this thing's leaking or not. Anyone else got anything on this one? We'll move on because we've got a lot of photos to cover. This is fun. Okay. So this is looking into the clarifier. Right away, there's a whole bunch that I see here that, you know, can make you feel good or not. See if we can get a little picture in there. See the pipe going out right there? That's coming from the other chamber, which is right over here. So there's a pipe right here. Can everybody see that? So basically, all the floating material is here, and then it flows into here, and then it probably flows out. We probably can't see the pipe out. But right away what I see is I don't see a whole lot of staining on the walls of this thing. I see a little sheen in the water, but I don't see a whole lot of staining in the walls. So that in my mind is a good sign. Remember, photos of good is good as photos of bad. If you can show good housekeeping, that the sump's fairly clean, not all grody, that kind of thing, in your phase one, you're documenting at that moment. A month from now, this thing could be trashed and leaking and spilling out goo all over, but you documented at this time and space that everything looks pretty good. So I think this looks pretty good. I don't know about you. I don't know what chamber this is. It would also depend on what chamber this is, whether it's the settling chamber or the float chamber where things float to the surface and get trapped. But hopefully they had really good pump records and disposal records. Then you can pretty much write this baby off. Anyone got anything else on this? No? Let's move on. Okay, this is kind of a fun one. There's a lot of things in this picture. I don't know how many times you've walked into a shop and it looks clean. You can see they just cleaned the floor, right? So what's the first thing you see? Absolutely. We got the floor drain here, and this drain should be a similar drain that runs into the clarifier. I don't know if these are connected or not, if these pictures are the same side or not, but that's a typical drain that would flow into a clarifier, and this looks like a shop. And here you got cracks in the floor, big cracks, not little cracks, big cracks. And they've cleaned the floor. So the first thing I'm going to do is find out, do they use some sort of solvent cleaner to clean the floor? And what's usually on the floor, what's used on site, which is probably petroleum products, go into that drain. So I would go over to that drain, since they just cleaned it, and see if there's any water standing and see if there's any sheen, and should take a good picture. Right now, because they closed the floor, so clean the floor so tight, I don't have a lot of staining left. I got a little here, a little here, a little here. But look at this staining that's real close to that crack. That could definitely be an area for, as a recognized environmental condition. I'd like to get more information on what the site is, what they clean it with. Anyone else see anything else? What is this right here, this big red box? What is PPE? Personal protective equipment, yes. So, man, that is, what's that tell you? That right away says, hey, they're using hazardous materials. They've got this for their visitors. Right away, you're getting, wow, they clean the floor. It flows into the drain. The drain flows to a clarifier. We've got a whole stream of things that could leak to the subsurface. Piping, drain, cracks, clarifier. Now we got to find out what kind of materials they use on site. What else do you notice in this photo that could be indicative to a lot of spillage? It's not so apparent. That's kind of a hint, right? Okay, see right here along the block wall? And I don't have a better picture, I wish I did. But you got staining on the wall. See that? That dark area, that's staining on the wall. I want to know what that came from. Lots of times you'll see that when you have an air compressor or a solvent tank, wash station for parts, that kind of thing, staining on the wall. Right there. You got a little bit of staining in the wall. I'd investigate that a little bit. I would definitely take a closer look at this drain because look at, it's got some pretty big debris that's being washed into it. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's pretty clogged up and gooked up. But you could also take one of these gratings off and look under it. It's going to tell you a lot. Okay, I think we pretty much got everything in this photo. Oh, there's the drain. Wow. Safety zone, that's why you got the PPE. Wow. What do we have here? Okay, so what's the to me the most major concern right now? I see something that might not be obvious to all you guys. What do you guys see? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, remember in a phase one, you don't do sampling. So you'd probably call this a rec and recommend taking a sample of the soils or whatever in the drain. And it definitely does look blocked up and cracks near the drain. So cracks near the drain blocked up, and the staining. And what really concerns me is you can see a line right across here and a line right across here. Because that drain backs up, it pulls water here, then that water can seep in these cracks, and drain to the subsurface. That's bad. The odds of, if there's something in this material in this water, the odds of the subsurface contamination here are huge. I mean, that's what this is indicative of. Big concern, right? So I'm looking at how this thing backs up and then is able to feed these cracks and these seams and go right down. Whereas a flowing drain, it doesn't have a long time to sit there and dwell and seep into the subsurface. But because this is partially blocked, it obviously does. So that would be my big red flag. Right here, this is a recognized environmental condition if I've ever seen one. As long as we got the facts that they use hazardous materials. That's petroleum products or hazardous materials, right? And then this is definitely a recognized environmental condition, and you would recommend in the next step actions to do a phase 2 and sample beside this drain, sample inside the drain, that kind of thing. Did I get everything on this? I think that's pretty cool. So that's the way I'd look at this. I don't know if you guys would look at it that way or not. Good call. So, wow. There's a whole bunch I see in here that's concerning to me. So, anyone want to get started on what you see here that could be a concern? Staining for sure. We got staining here, a little bit of staining here. But it's this staining that concerns me the most, right? We have double containment for some of it, but why don't we have double containment for this? Yeah, right there. Correct. The drum with the pump isn't contained. And this is a hand pump, by the way. And some drums are unmarked. And these markings are so bad you probably can't read them anymore. That's one of the big ones. See the staining up here? That could mean something they're doing inside here is leaking outside and staining. It's probably not from out here. Could be. But I would look on the other side of this wall and say, hey, what's creating that stain? There's still one other big thing that excuse me. Yeah, I'd probably want to look in those buckets and see what's in them. I agree. So we got double containment. So we have poor housekeeping. And poor housekeeping can be a wreck on its own. There is a line, not the air line, this right here. I think that's a grease zerk fitting thing to pump grease. This is an electric line. I'm not sure what that's for, but I'd probably want to know. This is part of the pump. So this little line here is part of the pump. We don't know what's in this drum because it's unlabeled. And so we'd want to know what's in that drum. It may be antifreeze. But there's still one other thing that is really standing out to me, saying that they spill a lot of material. And again, this staining seems to be coming from inside the building and leaking down the wall. But what about this right here? It says used absorb. Yes, used absorbent. I want to know what they're absorbing up and where at. I mean, that'd be a question for the site contact, and it's something they really need to know. So that's used absorbent. And how long's it been there? The lid's loose, water could get into it. It's probably outside, probably doesn't have a roof over it. But also look in here and see if there's standing water, standing liquid, standing anything with anything floating on it. Yeah, so that's all a concern. And these labeling's all a concern. So right away, the first thing is if they have poor housekeeping, chances are they're going to have lots of spillage and other things. And so it's a concern. I think we got everything in this photo. I'm going to zoom in on something if I can. Okay, so that electric line goes in here and goes into this double containment. Maybe there's a little float pump or something in there if it fills up and it pumps somewhere. The problem is we don't know where it pumps, right? Because we don't see the whole picture here. So that's kind of weird. That looks like a grease pump or some sort of heavy oil pump. I was looking over here to see if I could see anything. I can't. But see right here? See where my mouse is? I'm thinking that oil's draining from inside. I want to know what's on the other side of that wall. And it looks like this is all deep stained area. These are recent ones, but look right here. I'd take the back of my heel and scratch the ground and see what's underneath all this. Not counting all that heavy staining there. Okay, anyone see anything else we need to talk about here? Okay, so what is this? This looks like, to me, a pressure wash area. And this is probably feeds a clarifier. You can see all the concrete kind of flows to the center. Drain is probably under these trailers. You're right. We've got all kinds of things. We've got an above ground storage tank. We got drums not in double containment. We've got some in double containment, but we definitely got some heavy duty staining. So let's zoom in on this. Unfortunately, I can't see what this is, whether this is a monitoring well, a sewer clean out, what it is. It could be a sewer clean out. But you got drums. They do have some labels on it. I have no idea what's in this tank, but that's something I'd want to know. And hopefully the assessor took a picture of these labels. But you got all kinds of staining and splashing on here, and this is your pressure washer. Somewhere along the line, you've got your pressure pump, and you probably have some sort of grease cutting solvents over here and feed into the pump and then pressure wash. So, all this is a concern. You've also got this seam here. A seam always concerns me because seams leak. It may be where they put in, cut the concrete out to put in the sump, or maybe the sump was there, or, just a real bad job. See how there's a seam there, there's a seam there. I'm guessing there's one from all four corners that lead to the sump. And so in a wash area, having all these seams, that's a bad thing. Now, usually they try to seal them, but after a period of time, the solvents and stuff they use, the corrosive stuff, eats away at the sealant put in those seams, and then you get subsurface contamination. Also, one of the things to look for is etching in the concrete. I don't know if we have etching here because the photo isn't good enough, but it looks like maybe we do. And you can get etching because a lot of the grease cutters and soaps and stuff react with the calcium carbonate in the concrete and etch away at the concrete. Therefore, you know you've got something they're using that could potentially be hazardous material. Seems like there's a lot of staining on these posts too. So they're getting a lot of blow by or splash from the pressure. So again, I'd want to see what's under these trailers and determine if I'm going to make this area a wreck and see what they're using in those materials. Why these other drums aren't double contained. Maybe they're not hazardous materials. But these being double contained surely are telling me they're hazardous materials or caustic or something. I want to know what this is. I'd pop that lid. Anything else anyone sees that I missed? Let's keep going. We've talked for almost 40 minutes. Well, that's a little better shot. You know, it's actually cleaner in here than I thought, but it doesn't mean that they didn't clean it up. And you see this like funnel here? This may be a waste oil tank. And if it's a Convault tank, then it's already double contained. See these little plugs right here? You can take those off and look in the void space between the tanks. See if there's any leaking. You do got a lot of staining under here, but all this is probably from when they dump waste oil into here, goes in there. The pump would be to pump into a waste oil company, come pick up that waste oil and recycle it. So, and there ought to be some record, and there probably is a record report in your database search showing that, which would be in our rec check report. But there's your seams leading to the center to slope those slabs all to the drain. That's really interesting. They don't do this anymore. They make them seamless so you don't have the chance of leak. So this is probably a pretty old wash station. Oh, well, this is actually, you know what? This may be the drain in that wash station. So again, you're going to have pump records. So the sump is designed that the solids and everything fall to the bottom, and then this siphons off the top stuff to go to the clarifier, wherever their clarifier is. The holes are in it, so as they wash, everything just goes in. And they don't want anything bigger than this size hole going into this wash station. The nice thing about this is, although I do see some like sudsing or something, they're obviously using something to cut the greases, I don't see a lot of sheen. A lot of times, if there's a lot of oils and greases, you'll see a lot of colors, purple and colors in the water here that are going to tell you that there's a lot of oil and grease. So all we're seeing is muds and dirts and silts and stuff like that. That's not necessarily bad. So I'd have to see the pump records on this, and I'd be really concerned. But it is flowing, and that's a good thing. And you can see these sumps and everything and seams around the drains seem to be pretty sealed. So depending upon what they use and they get in there and what grease cutters they use would be whether I call this a concern or not, a recognized environmental condition. Anyone see anything I missed on this? Do you guys all agree with that? Whoever did the sidewalk, great picture, right? Again, they just used it, so it's really hard to see if a lot of oils and stuff have been going down there. But I really want to know what the solvents are they're using over here in their pressure washer. So this seam seems to be holding water. Do you see that? That's a good sign. Doesn't mean it hasn't leaked, but that's a good sign. Okay, here we go. We got an outdoor mechanic, man. We're an outdoor shop. Well, first of all, what concerns do you see in this photo? Colleen, you're absolutely right. Obvious staining. And the heaviest staining's probably over here where they work on the trucks. I zoomed in a little far, but I zoomed in on purpose. I wanted to see something. So first of all, you've got an air compressor. Air compressors are notorious for leaking compressor oil and needing to be filled up all the time. And so one of the things you really want to check is the staining underneath that, and this is setting on bare dirt. So you're absolutely right that all the bare dirt isn't covered, just certain areas. Here you have batteries and tons of staining around here. I don't know what that is, but that's a concern. And it looks like you got an above ground tank over here. See that? And since this is all outdoors, first thing I'm going to want to know is which way does all this drain when there's a rain? It's got to drain somewhere, and it looks like it drains this way. So where's all this drain to? Does it drain to bare dirt? Does it drain to a street gutter? Does it drain to a sewer? Where does it drain? Those are things I'm going to be questioning the assessor on when they come back from the field. Did you check this? Pitted. See that concrete's all pitted, right? What kind of solvents are they using that pitted this concrete? I'm also going to look over here and see if they've got aerosol cans, gallons, whatever of solvents that contain TCE, PCE, whatever that they could be using, and they're using it outside. Remember, you take a cup of TCE, trichloroethene, a cup of it, it's a clear liquid, spill it on a bare concrete floor like this, it penetrates that floor because it's a solvent. It's designed to penetrate pores. It goes through and it contaminates about, let's just say, depending upon the soil lithology, about a cubic foot of soil with liquid. And then that cubic foot of liquid starts volatilizing and can contaminate about a 10 by 10 square of soil vapor and contaminate. So now you've got vapor intrusion or potential for vapor intrusion or vapor contamination below, and that's about $100,000 cleanup in California. That's 1 cup of TCE. So you really want to know what they're using here, what's in this drum here. This looks like a wash station, a solvent wash station, doesn't it? Let's zoom in a little closer on that. Remember, I haven't seen these photos, so yeah, that looks like a solvent waste station. And usually you'll have somebody like Safety Clean or somebody come clean these out. This doesn't look like it's been cleaned out in years. So this whole area would be a concern for me. And remember, this is outside. Look at that. So it could get rained on. Look at all these cameras. Interesting, huh? Okay, anyone see anything else here? Okay, this looks like the same place. So, okay, I'm laughing because there's something here that really defeats the purpose of something else. So, you're right. We have double containment that they're not absolutely using, right? But I just want to show you something. What is that right there? They bored a hole in the side of the containment because it probably filled up with water and it made it unusable for it. So the double containment is basically worthless, right? Drains on the floor and see all this staining? Everything. Look at this old compressor unit, staining, whatever this is. Oh my God. Oily rags, probably waste oil. They obviously don't use the double containment for what it's supposed to be used for. What a mess. This is a recognized environmental condition, guys. And you're going to want to try to identify what they got on site. Definitely petroleum products, probably solvents, who knows what else. What a freaking mess. But I love that hole in the side. Now, you're right. It could have been a drain and it's just open and they don't have the proper rubber cork in it or whatever. I'm guessing they just roto-hammered that in there. Isn't that crazy? Now, this is asphalt, but asphalt is pretty porous. So hopefully your assessor followed this trail to see where it went. Because not only do you need to sample around here, you need to sample downstream wherever the end of this is, wherever it goes in. Definitely a recognized environmental condition, huh? Anyone see anything else? I just want to look over here a little bit. We've got another open drum, not double contained. I don't think this air compressor was originally here, but it could have been. They have a fire extinguisher, thank goodness. I don't know if it works. But I don't see anything else. Crazy. So this photo really doesn't have a lot. What it does have is it has this crack. And this right here could be staining and showing that it does go in these cracks. It could also, you want to be real careful that that isn't also just, it's just wet there from a recent rain or something like that. But you do have this staining coming off the concrete, and it looks like staining in this seam. And if we look on the very edge, this looks like a floor drain or something right here. I can't tell. I definitely have staining over here though, on these slats or whatever this is, right? So I'm going to want to know what's over here, and it's probably a wash station or something. I don't know. It's crazy. Anyone see anything else in there we need to look at? Okay. This is a fun photo. We have electrical transformers in here. What are we looking for on electrical transformer? Anybody? What are we looking for on electrical transformers? Come on, guys. You guys are rocket scientists. Staining. Staining and PCB oils. Well, of course, we can't look at an oil and say it contains PCBs. Of course not. So what we do is we look for staining, and if there's nothing that says no PCBs or whatever, then we would call it out as a potential concern. If there's no staining, it's not a recognized environmental concern. And because we don't have any facts that we know it contains PCB oils or not, it's not a big deal. But you want to look for labels. Lots of times they'll just have a little sticker on the transformer, or in this case, they have a big sign. Isn't that cool? And you can see underneath this transformer there is some staining. But you know it's not contaminated with PCBs because it has the sign. So you have to assume that they actually really sampled it and it's correct. But see the little staining under here? If we didn't have this sign, I would recommend that the owner request that the utility sample. Now, keep in mind, even if that's PCB contaminated oil on the ground there, it's not your client's liability. It's the utility company, and that's why you notify them. So it could be a recognized environmental condition until it's sampled, but the next step action could be request that the utility sample it. Then once they sample it, it wipes out that recognized environmental condition in the phase one. Remember, in a phase one, you're looking for potential for contamination. Not just present contamination, but potential. So a potential condition, potential vapor intrusion, potential subsurface contamination is a recognized environmental condition. Now, there's a fairly old transformer. Some of the really, really old pole mounted transformers are square that are really old. But this one actually has rust on the bottom and leaking. And so I'd want to see a picture below that to make sure there's no staining or anything from that. And then again, I'd follow the same actions. I'd check with the utility company to see if they've sampled all their utilities or not. I was looking to see if there's a photo. Okay, this is a fairly quick one, I say. What do you see here? Holes. Well, this is a clarifier. Perfect. You got it exactly right. Not all clarifiers are bad. These are grease traps. And these flow from the drains of the restaurant to catch the grease, and they pump them out. And you can see grease trail here and here. And even though you can't see that sign, I'm pretty sure it says Chinese restaurant coming soon. And this is grease traps. Now, cooking grease is not a hazardous material. No, I'm pretty sure it's a restaurant. And I think what that is that's tablecloths, napkins, linen napkins and stuff that they have a laundry service come and pick up. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. Yeah. So now, if this was a dry cleaner and this was a restaurant like we think, yeah, I might be a little concerned about that. I don't know. I don't know what that sign says up there. I can't read it, but this is definitely restaurant. See the R right there? So, no, I think that grease trap is pretty, it's probably at least 5 to 10 years old. I don't think it was recently installed. The one, and grease traps aren't a recognized environmental concern because usually they don't have hazardous materials. And grease isn't considered, like I said, isn't really considered a hazardous material. And it's usually so thick once it gets out of that water. Let's say it did leak outside of the grease traps. Grease trap is just like a clarifier. It's same thing, same principle. So if it leaked outside of this, it wouldn't migrate very far. So it's more of a bio problem than anything else. It can start stinking if they don't pump these things out right, and that kind of thing. Anything else? I think that's pretty good. Okay, this is a fun one. Shitty picture, but what is this? What are we looking at? We're looking at a dry cleaning machine that usually, except for recently, contain perchloroethylene, PCE. Bad to the bone stuff. Tetrachloroethene. All the same thing. Again, 1 cup spilled on the floor. This is the reservoir underneath. Holds this perk. And they've got to clean that out. What they usually do is they pump that out into a drum. Sometimes they spill it. Sometimes they leak. It only takes a cup. And their storage, they very rarely store it And they do. They always leak. There's always cracks in the floor, and it's always bare concrete floor. And at the bare concrete floor, remember, these are solvents. PERC is a solvent, PCE, and it hits the concrete and penetrates and it goes right through. Big time concern. Now, if you inspect one of these dry cleaners and they say, hey, we use the good stuff, the new biodegradable, great cleaner that's environment friendly. Well, yeah, maybe the last couple years, but what'd you do the last 10, 20, 30 years? Doesn't matter. That PERC does not biodegrade in our lifetime. So if they spilled any previously, it's still there, and it could cause vapor intrusion not only at this site, but adjacent site. And with this staining, and depending upon how they stored the drugs and stuff, this would be poor housekeeping right away and would be possible vapor intrusion into this site and adjacent sites. Subsurface contamination. Great wreck. So this looks like their storage. So this is their pump system for their PERC. You have a crack here with staining all around it. See all this back here? This is the pump system. Crack, staining. Who knows what this board's covering up? I'd hate to know what that is. This dry cleaner is scary, 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 guys. I don't know what that is. Is that wine or what? This is also their boiler here. What might you find a concern with? Oh my gosh, look at this. What is this here? Linoleum. The linoleum edge is all chipped up. Probably contains asbestos. It's old enough, brittle. This is the boiler. What does a boiler have? You're absolutely right. Solvents eat up the glue in the tiles and loosen them up. Now in this case, it doesn't look like tiles went over under this concrete, but it's bare concrete. But it's sure as heck eating this up. Also, boilers in the boiler piping would be known for containing asbestos insulation, wrapping. See this right here? That's probably asbestos cladding. TSI wrap, absolutely. Big concern. And of course, this whole thing's leaking. And really bad. And see all the stain? And I'd really like to know what's here. Because it may be a hole in the ground, an old floor drain that's deteriorated away. I would definitely kick that up and see what's underneath there. But this dry cleaner, as a whole should be a recognized environmental condition. Now remember, you can identify all these things in one rec and recommend subsurface sampling and identify potential vapor intrusion, subsurface contamination, possible asbestos-containing materials, all kinds of things you can identify in one rec. So you don't have to make each separate issue a rec. You can combine it and make it all one big rec, saving yourself time writing your phase one, but getting the point across, right? And you got so many facts that lead up to this being a recognized environmental condition, this dry cleaner. I wouldn't want to be the owner of this strip mall or whatever this is in, right? So this is the back room of the dry cleaner, obviously. That's the same crack. I don't think we're going to get anything else, but boy, that is bad, guys. Guys and gals, whatever. Okay, we're at about an hour and 5 minutes. Well, there's your drum of perk. Look at this seam right here. I wish I could use this label. If I had an assessor do this site inspection and they didn't take a clear shot of that label, we'd be having a discussion. So I don't know if you know, if this is perk and this is a water heater, would you be a little concerned? How about fire explosion? That'd be a big concern for me. I don't know if this is a back shed, room, what it is. Okay, so this looks like a paint store to me. Yes, keep your eyes out for paint solvents, thinners, mineral spirits. Paint strippers. Yeah, this obvious patch in the floor. Whoever took the picture is great, but you can also see there's a couple things, xylene, yes. There's a couple things that concern me here. So there's definitely a patch in the floor, but it doesn't look like it was professionally done, right? See how it's all rough around the edges? The concrete was drying up too quick for them to really smooth it out. Or maybe they just filled this hole first, or who knows what. There's obviously a pipeline. And there's a lot of whatever the surface paint they put on didn't stick very well. So maybe there was something in that, whatever it was. Was it a floor drain, floor sump? What? And how come they had to patch it? So there could have possibly been an old sump or clarifier here in the ground. So through your historical, you're going to find out what the site was used for before it was this paint store. And that would be a concern because you don't want to call it a wreck yet because you don't know what it is. Now, if you're not able to find out, interview the previous owner or user of the property or that kind of thing, and you've got an unknown feature and nobody can tell you what it is, then you've got no choice. An unknown feature that you can't discount that couldn't possibly have had hazardous materials in it, leaks, whatever, becomes a wreck. Remember that, a recognized environmental condition, the potential for hazardous materials or petroleum products causing a problem on the site. So it depends what the uses were, right? Everybody know what that is, right? Fire sprinkler riser. Yeah. Definitely a sprinkler says. Fire sprinkler riser. And on these things, all you want to do is look at the date when it was last inspected. And then you've got some paints here. As long as they're not old oil-based enamels that could potentially have lead in it, because white lead paint contained the most lead in it. They used lead for the color white. And so as long as these paint cans, I don't care about them being double contained or anything, as long as they're just water-based, not oil-based, and there's not a lot of staining around them. And I'd check to see if they have lead in them and they should be disposed of. Because having lead in them is going to tell you that they got lead on the walls and the door jambs and all the trim areas, right? Because enamels were the most common thing to contain lead. Oh my gosh, this is interesting. Anyone have an idea what this is? I'm trying to think where this is taken. So here's my take on this, and I don't remember. First of all, you have this rim of metal. So I would think an old tank fill port, because it'd be right here, and this would be a lid on this, or an old monitoring well, possible. Probably not a clogged drain or floor drain. Concerns me a little bit. You obviously got staining along here in the cracks. It's all deteriorated and staining along here. So it could also be what's left of an old in-ground hydraulic lift. And if I recall right, I think that's what this was. They had old hydraulic lift at one time outside to do work outside the auto mechanic room, and they just took the cylinder out and filled it with gravel. Is that crazy or what? And look at all the staining around it. So obviously, this should be pointed out as a wreck as you got more information on what that was. And a boring should be put beside this to see if any hydraulic fluid or anything else leaked into the ground. Crazy, right? Oh, this is a good one. Okay, what do you see here? I'm going to zoom in a little bit and it might make it a little obvious. Well, you guys are all definitely right in there. These are all cows out here, and this is a dairy farm that's been here forever. And they have to continuously, before milking, wash the dairy cow's udders with disinfectant before milking the cows twice a day, which creates a huge amount of water because they also wash down the area from them going to the bathroom and all kinds of things, and it all gets washed in and liquefied, and then they put it in these settling ponds. They have these ponds all over, and so then the water either evaporates or percolates into the ground and takes off. And so that's what all these ponds were. And this site, somebody bought this site to develop, thank goodness, not into residential, but into a big, huge transfer station warehouse, multi-million square foot transfer station. And so even though it was a transfer station, this site had to be sampled. And what this site have to be sampled for, everybody? Anyone know? Methane gas. So what happens is all the manure and all the manure contaminated water seeping into the ground seeps into fissures and stuff in the ground, and then it biodegradates and comes back up as methane gas. So methane gas is not only explosive, but it's also a hazardous material. And so we had to sample this whole site for methane gas. Where else can you get methane gas from besides the manure? And remember, they have big manure piles. See that pile over there? They actually make fertilizer out of it. Cow farts. Okay, Robert. You're right, but I don't think they can do much about that methane gas. And that methane gas kind of disappears. When the cows are gone. But what else happens is, remember, these dairy farms have been here 50, 60, 70, 80 years. And they have a cow or two a day that die. They get old and they die. Or they're not producing enough milk, and they try to sell them as dog food and other things, but sometimes they just shoot them. And what they used to do with the carcasses, they don't so much anymore. They used to take these carcasses, dig a hole, put them in the hole, and bury them on site. And so you'd have these patches all around the property full of these old decaying, degrading carcasses, and they would create methane gas as they biodegrade down, and that's a concern. So if you were to build residences on this site, you'd have to Swiss cheese this site with vapor wells in order to make sure that you're not going to have a methane gas problem. You know, what time is it? Okay, I'm going to go about another 10 minutes since I got most of you still with me, which is amazing. So, what is this? What is this right here? Right. It's a standpipe. Out in all your someone said exactly what I said. Pet extractor. I like that. No. Standpipe. Basically, they'd get their irrigation water and then they'd run it from there and pump it around and do all kinds of things. The reason you're really looking at this, and I don't see any in this, I just see PVC piping, is a lot of the older farm and fields had asbestos containing pipe going all over. And that pipe was called all kinds of things, from cement pipe to, gosh, I'm missing the name. But you could have piping in the ground that contained asbestos, transite. You guys all heard of transite siding. Well, in the old days, they used a lot of transite pipe. It was like cement pipe, and they added asbestos fibers to the concrete pipe to give it strength. And so here we'd be looking for transite piping. And I don't really see any in this photo, but that would be the concern. They definitely switched out the PVC, but who knows whether there's transite piping there. Yeah, the piping would be underground. Yeah, and when it does disintegrate, then what it does, it leaves behind asbestos fibers that it become, is a hazardous material. What do we got here? This should be easy. In California, it's almost always used underground. Okay, what do we got in this photo? What is that in front of us? Anyone who's ever done any farming or no? Well, right here is a well. This is a pressure tank. Electricity to run the well pump. It's a well on site. So the best thing to find out if the activities on this site contaminated the site is to sample the well water. It's sweet. This is an actual well. It's not your typical wellhead. They don't usually concrete it all in like that. But this is a well. There's a well pump, down well pump. That's a pressure tank, and that's electricity for it. Yeah, that's just the water pressure tank. So they pump into that, and it gives them pressure to be able to pump that water around. You know, the pressure makes it so they can put the water around. And this right here could be a water treatment tank to treat the water. It could be really hard water or something like that. And hard water will just clog pipes up and stuff like that. Pretty cool, huh? So that's a tote, if you don't know what a tote is. Well, this is kind of weird. If you came across that in the field, what would you think that is? This is gray, right? You can see that union right there? And it's a welded union. Gray and welded unions. I'm thinking that's a gas line. Gas lines are usually gray. Yes. Those unions usually mean it's pressurized. Good catch. So I'm guessing this is just a natural gas line, propane line, probably a propane tank nearby if it was propane. But it's a pressured line because of those unions. And because it's gray, it's usually a gas. Okay, we're back from the beginning. I've got this one photo. If you guys give me a minute to pull up this one photo, I'll pull up this one photo, and I want to see if anyone can guess what it is. This is the last photo. I'm almost there. Patience. I think it's, yeah. Okay. This is a great site, but there's so much in this photo, it's crazy. So, this site was about $250,000 cleanup site. And this is just one of the features of many, many, many on this site. This up here, oil water separator, no. Close, but not. Give me another guess for this, and give me a guess for this. It's kind of unusual. You don't usually see this. This was a screw manufacturer, and they ran screw machines. What screw machines did, they from bars of steel these machines would cut screws out of it. Big, huge machines, bigger than maybe two big, 3/4 ton pickups. That's how big the screw machines were behind those walls you see in there. These were screw machines. And they needed these two things to run their screw machines, basically. Right on. This right here holds a tank that's sitting in a vault. And they would dump or pump to here their old oil from the screw machines. The screw machines were, the rods cutting the screws out were bathed in oil all the time. And so then they'd come here and they'd recycle it. This was so filthy and so dirty, they might have well not had the tank inside the concrete vault because it was full of oil too. And they seemed to miss dumping the oil in with these buckets all the time. This is actually cleaned up before our inspection. They actually tried to clean this side up, but it was atrocious. Staining everywhere. This whole parking lot was like a big pool of oil underground. I mean, I was pulling soil out that was just dripping with cutting oils. That just drained right into a bucket. And so what this machine was, since nobody could guess, is, remember, all these screws and everything are being cut out with cutting oil, right? Well, they've got to be cleaned. You got to clean all that oil out of it. So they used tanks, big, huge solvent bath tanks, and clean the solvent out. This is a solvent distillery. They basically put the solvent in there, the used solvent, fired the baby up, and distilled out the solvent again and separated oil and solvent and reused the solvent. You couldn't use one of these things nowadays without a fume hood. I mean, this gave off VOCs like freaking crazy, right? But that's what this is. This is a solvent distillery. They dumped either the oils or the solvents into there, and probably the oils, and the solvents they'd pump, and then they just dump the old oil in here. This whole site, I've got other pictures I'll show you later, is just a crazy, crazy site. So the next one we'll go over this whole site, because wait till you see the screw machines and stuff, and I've probably got some pictures of the actual cleanup. But like behind this truck here, there was an old basement from an old residence that was here before this manufacturing plant was here. And when they tore down the old residence and built this manufacturing plant, and remember this manufacturing plant was about 80, 90 years old, they just filled in the basement. Well, what happened to all this oil leaked in it? And next thing you know, I got a basement of a house full of oil and solvents and levels you just wouldn't imagine, in heavy metals. It was a crazy, crazy sight. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. I've gone an hour and a half. I've gone twice what I was supposed to. Sorry. I hope everybody learned a little something. These are fun. We're going to do one of these classes a month, and we'll always have new stuff. And hopefully you picked up a little something. If you pick up, one or two things that you didn't know before, then you gain something from these webinars that are free. So remember, the way we fund these webinars and pay for my time is by you guys ordering products from us. So give us a try, become our client, Remember, tell your peers about us. We will also teach these webinars to your peers and to your other employees in your company. We can do private webinars. We don't charge anything. And we're out to help you guys succeed, not miss anything, learn something. And if you succeed, we succeed because you're using us. And again, we have thousands of these real life examples, and it's a blast. This site is just incredible. Wait till you see. Anyway, see you next time. And next time we'll go through this entire site, including a little bit of the cleanup, just so you could see what was involved. Okay, hey, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, everybody. And I'm going to go eat lunch. I'm starving. Thank you for attending. Later.